get a chance to see anything about anything about
Yeah, like in the evenings I've just been kind of walking around, to be honest, and just like exploring a bit, not really with a plan, just get some food and maybe a drink somewhere. But, so yeah, I haven't had a chance to really like go, oh, I want to visit here, visit there. But, you know what I mean? It's been a bit more.
But does the client also include cultural institutions?
Exactly, yeah, which is nice. So that's kind of it's kind of a different form of seeing a place, you know. So yeah, just have a few samples. I made really simple slides just in case, just because how many people are coming, do you think?
I think so far I count maybe 8.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
But I don't know.
That's okay. I know. I usually cut it in half. To be honest,
what's the worst situation you ever had?
Oh, like in London, at an arts festival in April. So like 2 months ago.
Yeah.
3 people came, but one guy was crazy, and like
he's on drugs or.
No, he wasn't. You know what? He wasn't crazy. He really like went out of his way to completely derail the topic of the conversation and turn it into. I think he wanted to make other people feel uncomfortable with what he was saying, slightly political, and you know, it was more around the arts what we were talking about. But yeah, he was totally. I didn't expect it at all.
So how do you kind of?
First, honestly, it felt like I was having an out-of-body experience because it was like I was watching myself just be like, like, I don't know, and I was doing it with somebody else and she was the same. We kind of looked at each other and then I didn't want it to become a sort of political discussion. So I just kind of tried to give him an opportunity to speak, but also other people. And it just ended up on a completely different topic to what we were planning. You know, and it's kind of the reason now where, when it's like this, it's, you know, I want to give people some background on who I am, what I do. But then I also want it to be kind of interactive. And like, if that's successful, it's like, having slides sometimes it kind of becomes pointless because you don't go chronologically so much. You know, it's less. I don't want to give people a lecture. You know, so
I'm very happy that you're not giving.
With
that attitude.
Because it's like I want to give people useful information, what's useful to them. So if I have like the opportunity to introduce myself. Talk a bit about the publishing industry, the company I work for now, but also give a couple of case studies I've worked on that might give people some help about like how you can judge if it's a good idea to make a book. Because that's kind of okay, okay. You hear me okay? Lovely.
Who else?
I had a meeting with the Suho Paper Museum.
Oh, I know them.
Yeah.
But you met
Lino, yeah.
Oh, I take photo for it.
Oh, nice. Yeah. And then, I saw like the Fenko. And and Moss Lee, the moss walls they do.
Yeah.
Really cool.
You meet Lino?
Yes. Yeah. She's really nice. Yeah. And then tomorrow it's a foundation set up by Pierre Chen, the art collector.
Yeah, but somehow it doesn't ring a bell.
Okay.
We know that.
Maybe I'm mispronouncing, but I think it's YOGEO Foundation, I think. But they're like they kind of like have a big collection of art and stuff. So, and I don't.
Yeah, this is a good one.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to that. That should be interesting.
Yeah, because they also support.
And how do you say it?
国剧.
Oh, okay. And then I'm also going kind of out of Taipei to the sculpture museum, the Juming.
Juming.
Yeah.
You have a good
Yeah.
list.
So that one's good. And then
You have a good list.
I have to. I think I go back to Suho on Thursday just because maybe I'll meet the director. Maybe I don't know.
Miss Chen or
Maybe, yeah. And then that's kind of it, to be honest. But
Oh, okay.
I'm also like I have to manage some other projects while so it's yeah.
But you didn't contact the other foundations.
Yeah, I contacted a lot, but like
List and Shuho, they are very nice people too.
okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's good. We'll see what happens, but yeah, I'm excited.
Korea, can I ask if
Of course, yeah. So we already have one client there.
because I saw the jewelry.
Yes, so that was our first client there, and then we also we're about to do another book with a collection there called the Eurus collection, and they're collectors of fans. I met with the National Museum of Korea, and then the Seoul Museum of History, and that was it really.
Okay.
But I met the Eurus collection. I met them twice because that one is like we're gonna, that was the reason that I started the trip. That project, we couldn't start it until I came to Korea to finalize it with them. So
Does the sales director need to be in charge of the whole project? Like from when, after you sign the contract?
it's a good question. Usually,
I'm sorry. Hi. Hello. I have no idea. You have to ask. Sorry, but you got the information from Beijing.
Yeah, thank you.
God does not exist.
Oh.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
I'm not 100% sure.
It's
Hello, everybody. I'm Sherif Dhaimish. It's a pleasure to be here to talk to you today about books. I'm my official, and I've worked in publishing for around 12 years in lots of different roles and worked on many different kinds of books. And I thought today I will share with you some of my experience from making books, from small like DIY zines to sort of bigger coffee table books, just to give you a little bit of an insight as to what goes into making a book. A lot of what to do, but also a lot of what not to do. And I think it's valuable to share this experience with different organizations and individuals who might be considering to make a book, you know, about whether it's about your art or your writing. The structure, I thought I would share first a little bit of my own experience in publishing to give you some background of what I've done in my career so far. And then I'll give you a couple of different case studies of books I worked on that I hope will show you how, you know, books can turn from a single idea into a physical object. And then boring presentation as well, by the way. So if you have any questions for me along the way, please don't hesitate to put your hand up. Once we've looked at the case studies, I'll tell you a little bit more about the company I work for now and how we work with different individuals and organizations. I've brought a few samples of books too, if you want to have a look afterwards. My career started 12 years ago, and mainly from Arabic into English. And then we started working in different languages also and working around the world. And I think my main focus in publishing has always been to try and give a platform to more underrepresented voices and try to give people the opportunity to publish, because I feel it is an industry that is quite difficult to get into, and it's a lot of people don't really know where to start. And from my own experience, I try to do things my own way, to be honest, because I found it a very difficult industry to break into myself. And now that I'm in it, I like to share information with people to show them how they could potentially publish books. So after that first job, I actually started working more with museums and galleries, and I realized that I really like working on more visual style books and finding cool ways to tell stories through visual graphics in books, combining text and images. And yeah, it sort of inspired me to start my own small company, which is called Pendle Press. And I work on small narratives from the area I'm from in England, in the northwest of England. And the first project I worked on, which I have the book cover here. Unfortunately, I don't have the book with me. And my father, he passed away 10 years ago. And in his life, he was an artist and also a political cartoonist. He was originally from Libya in North Africa. And he left Libya when he was a young man, like a lot of Libyan people in the 1970s after Gaddafi came into power there. And when he came to the UK, he started drawing political cartoons and publishing those in the 1980s. And actually, I only realized this later on, he actually was making his own DIY publications in the 80s. He was drawing his cartoons, he was sticking them onto a paper, and he was photocopying them and he was distributing them to other Libyan people and other Arab speakers in the UK. And over time, he built quite a big following for his work, especially when the internet age came and he was able to publish more and more cartoons. But he was also a painter as well. And after he passed away, I really wanted to tell his story to the world. And I started by, I did some exhibitions of his work in London, in my hometown, and in another city called Leeds in the north of England too. And we did, with the exhibitions, I thought maybe it would be nice to do a publication. And I wanted to get it right because one of the hard parts of doing a book is thinking, who is going to read this book, you know? And with this, it was a subject that was very personal to me. It was my father. So obviously, I had to take a step back and I had to think, it's easy for me to write something about my own father, but I need to write something that other people can understand and people can engage with, and try to turn this into something that would have more accessibility to the public. And so, you know, I did my research and I looked at all different ways that artist monographs are put together with collections of work, essays, and I tried to make it as engaging as possible. And it was really my, at the time, it was my biggest achievement in publishing. You know, it managed to get some attention people interacted with and people enjoyed, and it was a whole learning experience for me. And there was like a couple of things there were questions that I would ask myself: is it worth it? Is it worth doing a book? Because I can tell you that it requires a lot of energy, a lot of time, a lot of commitment. It's not something that happens quickly. It takes quite a long time to see how big the book is. And also, like I said earlier, who is the book for, you know? Because it's easy to want to make a book that you think will be a good publication for yourself, but you have to think, who is the audience and how am I going to reach this audience? So, and another thing is it worth, you know, the cost? Because how do you find the money to do a publication if you're doing it on your own? Or how am I going to find a publisher suitable to work with on something like this? So those were questions that I've kept in my mind all the time, and I've tried to sort of learn along the way of how to address these questions. And trust me, I've had many ideas that I thought would be a good idea to do a book. I've even made books that halfway through I kind of realized that I don't think this is a great idea, and I kind of lose enthusiasm. Whereas I've worked on some other books where and the next project that I'll show you is probably the best example of that I worked on. And it's actually, this was a book that I co-wrote and I co-published 2 years ago. It came out, but actually the idea for this book came to me in late, I think it was 2017, and this guy, Marcus Intellect, he passed away in 2017, and he was a musician, a drum and bass and techno producer and a DJ, and he was from my hometown of Burnley. And when he passed away, I learned that he had actually was part of a very sort of early underground movement in the 80s of sort of rave culture in the northwest of England. So I kind of realized that there's actually a much more interesting story about this person that I think would be a good story to share with the world. And I really let that idea sit with me for maybe a couple of years. And I started to do just a bit of background research and a good publication. I think it's a kind of publication that people will want to read, people will want to interact with, and people will buy, because, you know, if you want to make a book for the market, you have to want people to buy it. So that is kind of like a key feature. And yeah, with this book, I started to do the research, I started to interview people, I started to collect a lot of visitors, all different kinds of parties I went to meet the DJs who he had used to collaborate with. And the book came out in 2024. So it was, you know, it took me maybe 4 years to really gather all the information and to finally have a book that I thought was worth putting out there. But the most important thing with this book was I wanted to make sure that it was accessible and people could purchase it all over the world. And one of the biggest hurdles in publishing is distribution. You know, so for example, a lot of people, they'll make a book, they can do all the hard work and they can make a beautiful book, but then they end up with like boxes piled up in their house because they don't know where to put it or where to sell it. And actually, this is a really big problem in publishing, for particularly when artists or individuals work on something without a publisher that has good distribution. So what I decided to do as my own small publishing company, where I didn't have any distribution, was I teamed up with a bigger publisher that had a bigger distribution network and was able to put the book into the market and make it accessible around the world. And I was very grateful for that. You know, we were able to generate through a marketing campaign, we managed to generate around, I think it was 400 sales before we went to print. And that was actually how we could afford to print the book. We decided we would create some visuals online. We would create a video to promote the book using some of the video material from the interviews we did. And through that, we were able to create like a pre-sale for people to buy the book and, you know, let them have their name in the back of the book as a thank you. And basically we managed to gather 400 names of people who paid for the book before it went to market. And that was how we were able to produce the book in the end. So it's worth thinking about, if you are thinking about doing a book, there are ways of raising money before the book is actually completed. You know, you can find people to invest and believe in your project, but you just have to understand that it requires quite a lot of work to make it an attractive product that people will want to pay for before they've actually received the book. I'm going to show you just like a 1-minute trailer for this book that we managed to get the pre-sales from. So just bear with me.
This guy came in with like a cap and big glasses, and he's like, "Oh, nice to meet you. I'm Marcus. I'm Marcus Intellect." And he's like, "What?" It's difficult for anyone who plays real drum bass music not to play Marcus. His imprint, his sound was incredible. You have that techno background, you have the soulful background, sometimes the hip hop background. You have every element of his lifestyle in his music. He said, "I want to start a label called Solar, and I want to do a live constellation. I want to
book that we managed to generate the interest from. And yeah, it was probably like the most successful book I've worked on myself. That I also was the co-author, so I really wanted to make sure that it succeeded, really. But from those two particular projects I'm talking about, I learned a lot of different ways of working through the different processes of publishing, and it actually transferred, mentioned at the beginning, called Kulturalis. These guys, and what we do, we work as the publishing arm for arts organizations, museums, galleries, sometimes individual look. And what we do is we are the publishing service for organizations, because a lot, in the UK, for example, there's only like the British Museum, the V&A, the British Library that actually have their own publishing department. They have the money, the funds to publish their own material. Whereas most museums and galleries and so on, they don't, a team and so on. And like I said, the sales and distribution. And so Kulturalis, that's kind of the work we do. We're here to be a publishing partner for people who haven't got the means to publish themselves in the arts, culture and heritage sector. So I've been very fortunate through the work that I just talked about, and there's been a lot of other really, really dry, boring work that I won't talk about that I did, over the many years. But I always try to learn the different processes of how to make a book. And, I think that the title of this talk is, how to make a book. I think that it's health, and I know the sort of the questionnaires some people filled in before this. Some people were thinking about anniversaries, for example, of an organization, whether it's like a 10-year anniversary, and thinking about putting a book together. Is it worth it? Do I have enough material, and so on? And I think that it depends what kind of publication you're looking to do. And I think that there isn't really any limitations on what you can and you cannot do in terms of huge coffee table books that weigh a ton and have 400 pages. It's fine for something to be smaller. It's just going back to the questions I was talking about. You have to think if it's actually worth the time and the energy and the money that it will cost to do it. And I mean, there are a lot of advantages of putting a book out there into the world. I mean, can anybody think of any of the reasons why you would publish? You were thinking of doing a book.
New audience.
Yeah, a new audience. Yeah, a new audience. Good. That's one. Any other sort of a celebration, of particularly if you're looking at like a 10-year anniversary, for example, it's a solid object that people can take away and have at home. And in an age where everything is digitized and sort of out there on the internet and whatever and on our phones, there's something still, I hope, quite beautiful about having a physical object as a book to have. Anything else? Can anybody think of any other reasons why you would publish a book? Or
Is there now a signal that this person or this subject is important enough?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's an important point. And that it kind of reminds me when I worked on the project about my dad, and it was something that I was constantly. It was a really difficult one because I was like, is this important enough? But I think that it's definitely a nice way to sort of celebrate and put something out there, and You've got to decide those on bookshelves, in bookshops, or in people's homes. It's a cool thing. Yeah. Has anybody here wanted to publish a book, or has any ideas about publishing, or has anybody worked on a book previously? Has anybody had any experience in working on a book?
Currently, my collective,
Yeah.
because we went to the Taipei Art Book Fair and we won the final prize.
Oh, amazing.
And so they asked us to, that's why we to kind of check it out, to understand
Yeah.
what we're doing, and want to bring a book to do a launch party in the Tokyo Art Book Fair this year.
Amazing.
So, yeah,
And how far along are you with the book?
we're just collecting materials.
Yeah.
Because we have our collective for 3 years. So
Mhm.
I collecting all the images and the project that we did and all that.
Nice. And do you have an idea of how you will sell the book, how you will put it out there?
There as a launch thing, and then we're gonna just kind of started to sell from there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you'll be selling it direct?
Yeah.
Yeah. Ah, okay. Yeah, yeah. Nice. With the company I work for now, like what we do is, I think one of the big advantages that we have is that we have a good international sales and distribution network, which is kind of like a big selling point when we're working with certain organizations, because that's a big stumbling block for a lot of places, is that they can put a book together, but then it's like they want to make it available internationally, for example. Not always, you know, some people it's much better to just sell locally. I think these are questions. Selling it internationally, will it have an international reach, or is this a much more sort of localized project? So yeah, there's all sorts of things to think about. Yeah. Has anybody else had any ideas of putting a book together, or anything of their work, or so on? No, it's fine. I mean, it's the future, which is, you know, I don't know, and I hope that, you know, this information can be of some use. So, yeah. Does anybody know what like the first part of the process would be if you were to have a book and you were starting to gather the material, for example? How would you start to do that if it was a visual book, for example? As an organization, how have you started to do it? Have you just been working through your archives and?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We just open a Google file. And
Yeah.
then we have our project list.
Yeah, yeah.
Throw the image in there, and some article about it, and for now.
Yeah.
And then we can just
Like you're all essentially working as the editors and so on, you know. So yeah, that's kind of like the beginning part, is gathering the material, and then usually what we do is, you know, we work. Sometimes I work as an editor myself, so I work with organizations and I help them figure out what the narrative is and how to piece a book together. You know, what is it that you're trying to do? How are you trying to organize this information? And we find a nice way to make sure that there's smooth transitions through the book. It's like, these are kind of like things that you really need to start thinking about early enough, is like, do you have the good enough quality materials to put in there? If there is writing, if it's an essay or whatever, is it strong enough to publish? Does it need to be edited? Is it worth doing it in a different language also? Is there going to be appeal in other languages, you know? It's all these sort of elements are things that you should think about early. And also kind of like the concept, things that you start to think about quite early with regards to sort of the budget that you might have and so on. So, but yeah, after that, then it's sort of, you know, when do you need the book ready for example? You know, you need to start thinking about timelines. I mentioned earlier that sometimes it can take a really long time to put a book together. And one of the problems that I've run into many times, actually, is clients will want, they have a good idea for a book and they might have all the material and then they need the book in 2 months' time or something, like a super unrealistic timeline. And it's not that it's impossible to actually do it, but it means that there will probably be some corners cut on the quality, and ultimately this will end up, kind of being detrimental to the overall quality of the project, and it kind of makes it underwhelming in the end of it. My suggestion is to kind of work backwards and think when you need the book for, and then create a realistic timeline for yourselves to gather the information, to give enough time for production, and you don't, it's so stressful, there's so many things that can go wrong in publishing a book, and I've experienced some absolute nightmares, to be honest. I've had, once we published the guides for the Dubai Expo 2020 and the museum maps, and they were very last minute with everything they want, so we had to, their whole message for the show was sustainability, and then in the end they had to put the books on an aeroplane from the printer to get them to the event in time, which kind of defeated the point of what they were trying to portray in the books. And it was because they were changing things at the last moment, and sometimes it needs sign off from people above and so on. But and I've even worked on a book once where they were on, and the books ended up on the other side of the world, and the book launch was missed and everything. So all I'm saying is that if you do think about doing a book, try to think of all eventualities and give yourselves plenty of time to avoid stress and probably spending unnecessary money. And finally, the last thing I would say to really think about is sort of marketing and publicity, and making sure that you put some good effort into it at the end, and people are on the receiving end, and your work is out there to the right people, and you don't end up with dozens of whatever. So yeah, that's kind of like the publishing process and things to think about. But I hope that's been some sort of useful information to you, and giving you a little bit of an insight as to how publishing works. I'm on hand to answer any questions if you have any queries. I've got my card here as well. If you don't have anything now and you have a question down the line, or you're thinking about publishing, please feel free to get in touch. I might be able to offer you, I can send you some information about that. I'd be more than happy to offer any advice if it's of any use. Hello. Yeah.
I want to ask if I am talking from the foundation that we don't really have a kind of deadline to
Yeah.
finish one book, but we do want it. So what are the duration that we usually can consider that could be? Because I cannot spend like 3-4 years
Yeah.
to finish one book.
Yeah, of
But
course.
I do have a goal that from the foundation board asking me, we would like to have like the anniversary book you mentioned. Maybe it was 30 years, but only work for 10 years.
Yeah.
So how can I also collect other information from there, and what are the process I should also think about it?
So when would you like to have the book ready?
I guess for me to work ideally, if it's like yearly project, for example.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I think a year is a fair amount of time, and I think that if you were able to start gathering the material soon, and you had an idea of the content of, see that, like I mentioned, make sure you have good enough imagery to go in there, that it's high enough resolution for print.
What if, like, I said, like, my difficulty is, like, I only work for a foundation for 10 years, and during the past 20 years, they might not be always high resolution
Yeah.
photograph. What will you do, or what will you suggest?
Yeah, I guess you'd have to think of some like creative solutions around that, whether whether it's actual physical photographs that need to be scanned. Showed previously about Marcus Intellects.
Yeah.
That book was essentially a collection of oral histories. So I interviewed like 30 something people for that book. And what I did is I pieced their sort of stories in, from like the 1980s, early 90s, when there wasn't any visual material. I didn't have any photographs to support that. So what I did is we made the book into something quite visually attractive with the words, if that makes sense. It wasn't just text. A graphic designer turned it into something where it felt more like an interactive, or like a magazine where you could flick through it. So my suggestion would be if you don't have that much visual material from the previous 20 years, people, and having interviews and maybe doing a collection of oral histories rather than relying so much on imagery, if that makes sense. So yeah, as long as you have the information there, there's different ways you can present that. Yeah, it's not easy, but I think that it's possible. Yeah.
And how do you suggest to choose who do you work with? Because like for us, like we don't really have a published like department.
Yeah.
Foundations, publishers are also choosing. Do we want to work with?
So yeah, it's a really good question, and actually there's so many different business models out there in publishing. So first you have like the DIY model. People do it themselves, and like I said, like your organization, you self-distribute, and sometimes there might be grants, bursaries out there. There's other ways, like I mentioned with the Marcus Intellects book, where we were able to get people to buy the book before copies were sold. We were able to print 3,000 copies, and then obviously it becomes, I say profit, because I worked on it for you're like a big selling author who can sell tens of thousands of books. I think you have to accept that there will be an element of this being a labor of love, So that's one model. Then there is the traditional trade model where you can pitch to publishers who will essentially do your book for you and pay for everything, pay for the production. They will put it into sales and distribution, and you will receive because they often work quite a long time ahead. So like, for example, to publish a book next year, that would, like, for big publishers, like, they'd just be like, that's crazy. You're thinking 2-3 years down the line, their schedules will be very big. And so the other way of working, particularly in the arts, is with companies like us at Kulturalis, where what we do, we are, like I said, we're kind of like a publishing arm we're very flexible on how we work with people. So for example, like sometimes an organization might just want to do 500 exhibition catalogs, and they just want the catalogs themselves, and they will sell them themselves. That's fine. And then sometimes we will offer, we will say, we will print 100 books ourselves, and we will put those into the international distribution, so your project has visibility, and we will do the cost of this, and then when the book sells, we will give you 70-80% of the net from that, just so that we like to make sure that the books have international visibility, even if the client and sometimes people don't want to take any books themselves. Maybe they'll say, I just need 20 copies to distribute for free, and then the rest of them, we want those to go into the distribution. And then usually what happens is like 90% or sometimes even 100 of the net profit, once it's sold in the distribution, it just goes back to the organization. So at least you can recoup some of the cost that goes into publishing. And this, to be honest, in the arts, working with like Thames and Hudson, or this is like these kind of big arts publishers, and they're quite specific. But it's not impossible to work with them. You just need to have a strong pitch for your idea and find the right editor, which you can do, you know, through looking on their website, LinkedIn as well. You know, you can find the right people to approach for that. So, yeah, those are kind of like the different business models. Yeah, I hope that helps.
For Kulturali, do you guys have any experience with London Art Book Fair? What I ask is because since we have been to Taiwan's Art Book Fair and Tokyo Art Book Fair, and then we kind of started, a lot of people suggest us to go further. And do you have any insight and knowing like what's the style? Like for instance, like Taiwan's Art Book Fair are very much like night market style, like very party scene.
That's cool.
And the one in Tokyo is complete opposite.
Yeah.
It's very like organizing, publishing. They have like very like grandstand. It's very formal.
Yeah.
So I don't know what's the.
It's a really good question. So like the main one in London, the London Book Fair, is it's quite corporate, and it's like it's really corporate now, and it's not party scene at all. You know, like I think like a lot of the bigger pavilions now are like the Saudi government, the organizations from the United Arab Emirates. The floor space is like crazy expensive. So like even this year we didn't get a booth. We didn't take any space. We just went there as reps and we had meetings. But next year it's changing venue. So I wonder if they're trying to make it a little bit more lively and accessible again. And because what happened is it kind of got dominated by a lot of the big publishers. And when a small company, I started to actually attend a lot of the smaller art book fairs. And in the UK, there's a lot of those. For example, there's one in November in Manchester called Bound Art Book Fair, which is a big one. Last month, there's like one weekend, I think the first weekend of May, you have the Photo London Book Fair, and it takes place at the same time as another one called Peckham 24, which every time that takes place in the Tate Modern, they have another print book fair. So there's 3 big ones on one weekend. And actually, these ones have become much more popular because there's a lot of tables where an organization, like, they might just have one publication, and some tables where an organization, like, they might just have one publication and some pictures of their art or something, and it's a really nice way to network with other people and sell your work in a similar environment. And they're very different to like the London and sit in a quiet corner and I'm like, what the hell am I doing here? Like, it's so overwhelming. And yeah.
So London Book Fair and the one that you mentioned in Tate.
Yeah. That's, I think it's off print. Off print is like the big one they do in the Tate. Okay. And Photo London have a big art book fair now, which is now it's gone beyond photo books actually. Like and also Peckham 20 and also Peckham 24. Every year, like the last 5 years, it's grown and grown. So because London is such an expensive city, like a lot of the smaller fairs, they're getting more and more attention because it's cheaper to have a table there. And like the one I mentioned, Bound in Manchester. London obviously is, if you're going to travel all the way there, I would definitely have that as your primary place to look at. But there are other growing book fairs. Bristol as well is another place. A lot of art book fairs are growing. So yeah, it's a good question. Yeah. So has anybody else got any questions? Hi.
I'm not sure if my question is related to your topic.
That's okay.
I've been working in printing industry for like 20 years.
Yeah.
Really, like just before we might printing 3,000 copies, and then suddenly 300.
and some might turn to EPUB, e-publications. As a reader, the content of my normally I tend to buy books related to social issues, and as a reader, I can feel that the experience of reading paperback books, in contrast to those like on Kindle,
Yeah.
it's definitely different. With the paper on hand, we can like really immerse and concentrate into the content, whereas the ebook kind of get distracted very easily.
Yeah.
But as you mentioned that, why do we make books? Impact-wise, what's the difference of a paper book and the ebook book? What's the difference of these two kind of type of publications? Lived in Cambodia for 3 years, and I can see that those books relating to Cambodian social issues, they tend to publish in 2 languages. One is English, because the author writes in English, and the second they will publish in Khmer, the Cambodian language. But of course, the locals, they cannot afford such high price internationally published books, so they tend to like deliver the EPUB freely in Khmer version, but whereas charge.
A huge subject, and obviously I have to try to remain optimistic about the book market because it's my job, and I'm in publishing. My first job, as I mentioned at the beginning, was with a small publisher where we did paperback novels, and they were in translation from other languages. And our focus was novels that were kind of popular in countries that didn't have a representation in the English language. So we started, because we all had Libyan heritage, we started with Libya and we did books from there, and then it kind of grew into the same area. But at that same time, that's kind of like when Kindles were getting more and more popular, and it was like, it was so hard to sell a book and also for us to compete at the prices. Like, for example, the cost for us to be competitive in retail, it was costing us around £9, which is around 450 Taiwanese dollars, something like that. Which, you know, for us, we were only printing 1,000 copies, 2,000 copies maximum. So like the profit margin after the distributor and the sales take the money was pennies, you know, it was nothing. But we had to compete with the big publishers who can do a similar book, and they can print 10,000 of them at a much smaller cost. And yeah, I think that at that time, I felt reruns, and also to work with clients and contract publishing, because I realized that unless I'm working with one of these big publishers, I'm going to be out of a job soon. And sure enough, the company, we had to stop because, you know, it just wasn't making any money. I think now maybe there is a bit of a resurgence in sort of paperback books, and I think, you know, people are buying more books. I mean, I don't know. I mean, or am I delusional there? I don't know. Second-hand books, you know, because I have some good second-hand bookshops near me, and they're cheap, and yeah, it's less commitment. You know, a new hard £20, £25 sometimes, it's a lot of money. So yeah, I really don't know if, you know, paperback books will continue to sort of exist, but I think that there is, the way publishing works now, something I only realized in the last couple of years is that a lot of the reading trends that tend to happen in the English language, I can only speak for. So, for example, like Korean literature is really, you know, and a lot of these trends, they tend to start with the small publishers who are doing cool, innovative things, and they find books in other languages or other cultures, and they try to put them on a platform. And then what happens a lot of the time is the bigger publishers go, great idea. Let's throw more money at it, and we can do it bigger and better and pay everybody more money. And I think that when I realized that, I kind of thought, it's like fighting. You know, having a PDF of a book, because you know you can't really look at like an art book on a Kindle or something. I don't know, can you? I don't think it works, does it? So visual books kind of will stand the test of time, and who knows? I mean, in an age where technology and, you know, obviously AI is going, maybe there is a slight resistance and a shift to more sort of traditional methods of us receiving information. I know your work deals a lot with the subject of you know, the rise of AI and so on, but I don't know if that's something you realise or have noticed, or is that, you know, just me being optimistic that maybe younger people are put to. Do you think books benefit from that in a sense?
It's into anything that's alternative.
Yeah.
You know, like the resurgence of vinyl, cassettes,
Yeah,
books,
yeah.
the DIY magazines.
Yeah.
What do they call the magazine culture that's
Zines.
zines? That's a huge thing.
Yeah.
There's loads of independent publishing going on.
Yeah.
And fairs in the UK. A lot of artists doing that.
Yeah.
It reminds me of running a record label in the 80s where you describe that whole process.
Yeah.
Looking for distribution,
Yeah.
covering your costs, figuring out where the profit kicks in. Your heart ain't in it, the rest isn't going to follow.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I think like probably about 18 months ago, I was kind of drifting in and out of freelance work. I moved from back up to the north of England from London after many years, and I really sort of like started to question like why am I still working in publishing? Like, this is so difficult to find work. And then I think that at my core, I do genuinely love it. I love making books. It's something I grew up with from being a little kid. You know, it was my father was an artist. My mother still is an artist. And I grew up in a house where there was a lot of books and there was an appreciation of print and receiving information that way. And I think it's...
To do with legacy, because once it shifted out of the digital back into the analog, I mean, a lot of the digital is disappearing. You know, the idea of keeping a diary, keeping a sketchbook, that started to become obsolete in 1990, 91, 92. So then you've got 20 years worth of missing histories almost. So on the smaller individual and personal level, there's an obsolescence that's happened, and I think there's a kickback against that.
Yeah.
It's always nice to see you working a book.
Yeah, definitely. The two books that I showed you previously and some of the other books that I've worked on, I thought a book is the perfect way to celebrate somebody's legacy. In the same way with you know, if we think about music, like I grew up as, you know, it was CDs for me when I was growing up, and I find it, I used to love the process of going to the music shop on a Saturday, you know, reading the lyric, whatever it was, looking at the photos and owning the CD, and it was a very special thing. I mean, we can probably all remember the first album we bought, you know, and now we kind of have Spotify, and a lot of the new music that we discover actually comes from algorithms and so on, you know, and it's almost, there's an overwhelming amount of it out there, and I think that books are, you know, are similar in the sense like a CD or a vinyl or a tape. So, and there is a resurgence in that, and it's good. Yeah, sorry.
I mean, it's funny you said that one of the first things you do would be to collect the material. I'd see that as collecting the assets and put them aside. But I think you'd have to have some vision of what you want this object to look like. So for me, the most important thing would be to almost design it first.
Yeah.
Design some templates. So when you say what would be the next stage, well, actually the first stage would be to put half a dozen of these assets into a template and say, do I like the look of that?
Yeah.
Because there's no point getting it back after a year or two and saying, well, actually, we shouldn't have gone all in.
Yeah.
And that would have taken us a week.
Yeah.
And if necessary, just have a look at a dozen templates online, or hire a professional designer.
Yeah.
You know, and work backwards. I mean, don't stick it in Google.
Like when.
Because then if you did that as a DIY, you could at least then approach some other publishers and say, this is our approach. Are you interested? And they're going to come back and say no.
Yeah.
You know, and is a really useful piece of information.
Yeah.
Because then you can go back and say, why?
Yeah, exactly.
Let a look at it.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a-
Yeah. Of course, yeah. And I mean, it's like when we're working with people, we're like one of the first things that we do is sort of mock-ups of the book to make sure that we get the design and aesthetic.
Time frame thing that you
Yeah.
mentioned. I'm not going to mention the publisher, but I've been involved with one that
Yeah.
began in 2019 and it's still not published.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
You know, everyone's been paid,
Yeah.
but it's not hit the hard copy print yet.
Okay. Wow. And what's it? Do you know what the reason for that is? It funds or I mean print? Is, yeah. Yeah.
No funds, the funds are there.
Okay.
It's not funds.
That's other politics underneath. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And
Does
the,
it?
and the scale of the scale and ambition.
Scale, yeah,
Scale
yeah.
and ambition of the project.
3 books is a lot. Yeah, for sure. Does anybody have any other questions? There's some there's 4 books down here. Just like you know, it's not really about the content there. It's just I wanted to bring 4 different examples of what different formats to show you from a coffee table style book to like a smaller almost booklet, you know, and just show you that things can vary in their sizes. And you know, I'm around, so if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. And my card's down here, so please take one, and if anything shoots in your mind later. We work with printers internationally, and it actually varies project to project, depending sometimes on timeline, depending on budget, and depending where they need. If it's a quicker turnaround, we can do things in the UK. It's usually a higher unit cost. Yeah. But thank you everybody for coming. I really appreciate it. Cheers.